Anna Briggs always knew she saw the world differently. While other children played at recess, she sat on the wooden bench near the library, reading the same book for the 10th time. Not because she didn't understand it, but because there were new details to discover with each reading. She had memorized the number of steps on the school staircase, 23. She knew the exact temperature water needs to reach to boil, 212 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. She also knew the scientific name of every whale she had ever studied, Balaenoptera musculus, the blue whale, the largest creature that ever existed on Earth. Whales were her passion. There was something about them that Anna understood in an intimate way. Immense, powerful creatures that lived in a world different from ours and yet still needed to rise to the surface to breathe. She also felt that she lived in a slightly different world. Not a worse world, just another one. The diagnosis came when she was 4 years old, autism spectrum disorder. Her mother, Carol Briggs, cried for 3 days straight. Then she dried her tears, looked her daughter in the eyes, and said, "You are going to be a lawyer." It was not a question. 25 years later, Anna Briggs walked through the doors of Harrison and Cole Law Associates for the first time on the 12th floor of a glass building in downtown Chicago. She carried a black briefcase, wore a navy blue suit her mother had insisted be ironed 3 times, and murmured quietly as she walked down the hallway. Corridor with 16 doors, 8 on each side, gray carpet, windows facing west, fluorescent lighting, approximate temperature of 72 degrees Fahrenheit at sea level. A secretary watched her pass with one eyebrow raised. The managing partner, Mr. Richard Harrison, received her with a firm handshake and a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Anna Briggs, graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern Law, first in her class on the bar exam, he paused, and personally recommended by Professor Douglas as the finest student he has taught in 30 years. "That is accurate," she replied directly, without false modesty. "Professor Douglas told me that personally on Tuesday at 2:42 in the afternoon." Richard Harrison cleared his throat. "Well, you will start as a junior associate. Your supervisor will be Mr. Daniel Crawford." Daniel Crawford was 32 years old, had neatly combed hair, and the habit of adjusting his tie knot every time he was nervous. When Anna walked into his office, he adjusted his tie twice in under a minute. "So, you're the new hire," he said, trying to sound neutral. "I am." Anna looked at the bookshelf of legal volumes behind him. "You are missing volume 3 of Williston on Contracts. There is a gap between volumes 2 and 4. Daniel looked at the shelf. There was, in fact, a gap. He adjusted his tie a 3rd time. In the first few days, comments circulated through the office like smoke. "She keeps repeating the same phrases. She doesn't make eye contact when she talks. She's always murmuring in the hallway. Did you see how she reacted when Jennifer touched her shoulder without warning?" The paralegal, Sophie Turner, was the only one who made no comments. Instead, on the first Friday, she placed a cup of chamomile tea on Anna's desk and said, "Do you prefer tea or coffee?" "Tea. Coffee makes my senses feel too accelerated." "Tea it is," Sophie said, simply. "I prefer tea too." That was how the only true friendship Anna had outside her own family began. The first difficult case arrived 3 weeks later. It was an inheritance dispute, the Whitfield family against the Whitfield family, 2 branches of the same family tree that had deeply hated each other for 40 years over a property in rural Vermont. There were contradictory wills, deeds with suspicious dates, and an absurd amount of paperwork that no one had managed to organize in 2 years of litigation. Mr. Harrison looked at the pile of documents on the table and sighed. "We need someone to read all of this." Daniel Crawford raised his hand to take the case, but before he could speak, Anna was already on her feet. "I read it." Silence. "You read the entire case file?" Daniel asked, incredulous. 483 pages. The central issue is on page 217. There is an inalienability clause inserted in the 1987 will that invalidates all subsequent acts of disposition. However, this clause was drafted ambiguously, and the original attorney used terminology that, at that time, had two distinct legal meanings. If we can prove the testator's original intent using documents from that period, we win. No one spoke for 5 seconds. "You read 400 pages in one night?" Mr. Harrison asked. 483, Anna corrected. "And yes, I have a photographic memory. It is a common characteristic in people with my neurological profile. People usually find it interesting when it comes to whales, but apparently it is more impressive when applied to legal proceedings." Daniel Crawford laughed involuntarily, a brief, genuine laugh that he quickly muffled with his fist. They won the Whitfield case. Then came the Patterson case, a labor dispute that seemed hopeless. Anna found a 1994 precedent that no one else had located. Then the Mercer case, a contract law matter involving a construction company. Anna identified an abusive clause buried in the middle of an 80-page contract that the most experienced partners had signed without noticing. Case after case, the raised eyebrows gradually gave way to cautious respect, and then, for some, to genuine admiration. For others, not so much. Miss Victoria Lane had been a partner for 12 years at the firm. She had a reputation for being efficient, elegant, and relentless, and she applied all three qualities to eliminating people she considered inconvenient. Anna was inconvenient. "She makes clients uncomfortable," Victoria would say in a low voice to Richard Harrison during partners' meetings. "She lacks the interpersonal skills a lawyer needs. It's a matter of the firm's image." What Victoria did not say, but what pulsed beneath every one of her words, was simpler. "She unsettles me. She doesn't act the way a person is supposed to act, and I don't know how to handle that." Anna was aware of the resistance. She was very good at reading patterns, and Victoria Lane's pattern was quite readable. "She doesn't like me," Anna said one afternoon to Sophie while the two of them were having tea in the break room. "She doesn't like you," Sophie agreed honestly, "but that doesn't mean she's right." "I know," Anna said, looking at her cup. "What bothers me is not that she dislikes me, it's that she uses the fact that I am different as an argument, as though being different was a technical flaw that needs to be corrected or removed." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Have you ever thought about speaking up about that, out loud, to people?" "I do it all the time. The problem is that people tend to hear the way I speak, not what I am actually saying."
The case that changed everything arrived when Anna had been at the firm for 8 months. A 10-year-old boy named Tyler Reeves was at the center of a custody dispute involving serious allegations of neglect. His mother wanted custody, his father wanted custody, and Tyler, who was also on the autism spectrum, was caught in the middle, being treated as a legal variable rather than a real child. When Anna read the case file, she was still for a long moment. Then she went to Daniel's office. "I want this case," she said. Daniel looked at her. In 8 months, he had learned to recognize the difference between the moments when Anna was simply being efficient and the moments when something deeper lay beneath the surface. This was one of the deeper moments. "Why?" he asked carefully. "Because no one in this case is asking what Tyler wants. They are asking what the parents want, what the grandparents want, what the system wants. Tyler is 10 years old and is perfectly capable of having an opinion about his own life." She paused. "I know this because I was also a child who had opinions that no one asked about." Daniel nodded, slowly. "The case is yours." The hearing took place on a Thursday afternoon. Anna prepared with the rigor she applied to every case, but also with something she rarely used consciously, her own experience. When it was her turn to speak, she addressed the judge with her characteristic precision, but this time there was something more. "Your Honor," What is at stake here is not simply which parent Tyler will live with. What is at stake is whether this legal system is capable of seeing a child like Tyler as a person with rights, not as an object of dispute. She presented evaluations, testimonies, precedents, but she also presented something unusual, a letter she had written to the judge herself, describing what it was like to grow up being constantly interpreted through other people's lenses, rather than her own. It was not a formal legal argument, it was a witness telling the truth. The judge read the letter twice. At the end of the hearing, he ruled that Tyler had the right to be heard directly with a specialist in alternative communication before any final custody decision was made. It was not a definitive victory, but it was the acknowledgement that Tyler existed. Anna stood still for a long moment after the gavel fell. Sophie, who had come to watch the hearing, walked over and stood beside her in silence. "Are you okay?" Sophie asked. "I am. I'm just processing." "That's fine. I'll wait." There was also Ethan Morris. Ethan was a law intern, 23 years old, with the mildly irritating habit, in Anna's assessment, of appearing at her office door with questions he could clearly have answered himself with a little more research. She pointed this out to him on the third time. "You are capable of finding the answer to that question by consulting Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 26 combined with the relevant case law available on the court's public database. Why do you keep coming to me?" Ethan turned slightly red. "Because I like talking to you," he said with disarming honesty. Anna was silent for 4 full seconds, which for her was a long silence. "That is information I need to organize," she said finally. Ethan smiled. "Take all the time you need." She organized it. It took a few weeks, but she organized it. There was a pattern in how Ethan appeared at her door, always after lunch, always with a cup of coffee in his hand, always with a question that was, in reality, a pretext. There was a pattern in the way he listened when she spoke, with complete attention, never trying to finish her sentences. There was a pattern in how he never touched her without giving some warning first, and how he had simply learned that by observing. One afternoon, while they were working together on a research assignment, Anna said, without looking away from her screen, "I think you make me feel calmer than most people do." Ethan paused his typing. "Is that a compliment?" "It is an observation, but yes, it is a positive one." Ethan resumed typing, but there was a smile at the corner of his mouth that stayed there for the rest of the afternoon. At the end of her first year at the firm, Anna was called into Mr. Harrison's office. She walked in prepared for the worst. There was, in her assessment, a 40% probability that Victoria Lane had succeeded in convincing him that she was a problem. Instead, Richard Harrison was standing with his back to her, facing the window, looking out at the city below. "Do you know what your case success rate was this year?" he asked without turning around. 87.3%, she answered immediately. "The highest in the firm." He turned around. "I want to offer you a promotion." Anna processed the information. "That will generate internal resistance." "It will," he agreed, "but it is the right decision." He paused. "Look, Anna, I am not going to pretend I was fair to you from the beginning. I brought you on because of your academic record, but I had doubts you didn't deserve." She looked at him directly, something she did selectively when a situation called for particular attention. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "It wasn't necessary, but it was the right thing to do." He extended his hand. She shook it. That evening, Anna went to visit her mother. Carol Briggs lived in a small house in the neighborhood where Anna had grown up. The kitchen table still had the same blue and white checkered tablecloth from her childhood, and the smell of her mother's cooking was still the safest smell in the world. Carol set 2 plates on the table without asking, "How was your day?" "They promoted me." Carol stopped with the spoon in midair. Then she set the spoon down, walked to her daughter, and hugged her, slowly, signaling with a hand on her shoulder first, as she always had. Anna closed her eyes. "I told you," Carol whispered. "You said that when I was 4. "I did, and I was right." Anna kept her eyes closed for a moment, taking in the familiar smell of the house, the distant sounds of the street, the familiar weight of her mother's embrace. "There's something else I want to tell you," she said after a moment. "Go ahead." "I think I have feelings for someone." Carol pulled back slowly, looked at her daughter, and smiled, a wide smile, the kind that reaches all the way to the eyes. Then tell me everything, from the beginning with every single detail. Anna sat down, aligned her silverware in perfect parallel, and began. His name is Ethan, and he never touches me without giving me some warning first. There are people the world tries to fit into shapes that were never made for them. Sometimes those people learn to pretend they fit. Sometimes they find the courage to show that the wrong shape was the world's, not theirs. Anna Briggs never pretended, and that is precisely what made her extraordinary.